Grey County.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm your host, Sharen Skelly, sitting in for David Shearman today. And today we're going to be talking about Labor Day and everything that has to do with labor and employment and employers, employees. Guests today are David Trumble and Chris Stephen, and they are both associated with the Bruce County and Grey Bruce Labor Council. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
It's a good time to be talking about labor. There have been a lot of ups and downs with labor. We've just come through, well, we're still really in the midst of COVID, and that has made a lot of changes to the way workers are doing their work. Some people have been doing it at home. Some people actually lost their jobs and maybe returning to the workforce. And the workforce has been experiencing some changes. People are saying that the stats may not reflect the way that the workers see that the work that's available really is. So there's lots to talk about. And people are returning to school right now, and so are teachers returning to the classrooms. And once again, the way they've been working in the last 2 to 3 years is evolving. So really, there's a lot to talk about with education too. So really, there's, probably so much we could talk about and so little time. We could probably come back 2 or 3 times and cover everything. But you two people have been on the forefronts of labor and the labor movement for, I won't say a long time, because that's not really complimentary when we talk about things like that, but you've been on the forefront of the labor movement for a while, and you've seen these changes. So I guess what I'd like to first say is, or ask is, Dave, what got you interested in the labor movement? What piqued your interest in that?
Well, first of all, you can be quite comfortable in saying long time. I'm afraid the color of my beard and the color of my hair gives that away. So I can't hide from that one. But for me, I'm actually a Scarborough kid, right? I mean, I nowadays say I'm from away and my home is Kincardine, but I'm a Scarborough kid. And what first of all got me interested was in the sort of late 60s, early 70s. As I entered into high school, I was already beginning to see the shrinking industrial base of all those good union jobs disappearing. And I felt, you know what, if I was fortunate enough to go to a workplace where there was a union, I told myself that you're going to get involved with the union movement, with the labor movement. And if nothing else, if you're in one of those workplaces that sadly disappears or you have to find other work, you're going to be in a position from a union to speak loudly and proudly about the work you've done and hopefully do the best for the workers that were there. Now, I admit that sounds like a very heady position for a 14-year-old kid going into high school. That's how I, as a 66-year-old, view my thought process all those years ago, because that's where it landed me off. So it was just seeing the pain of families as I was growing up. And in my world, I was fortunate. My dad had a union card in his wallet. He was seeing a bright future. And I thought, you know what, maybe my voice needs to be heard.
Exactly. And what about you, Chris? What got you interested in the labor movement?
Actually, very similar to Dave, but it was more my dad he was a union member when he worked for Ontario Hydro. When he came to then Chesley, now in Erin Elderslie, he was one of the forefront members that got the card signed and brought the union into Erin Elderslie, and he was the one that kind of spurred me along when we got going and we got our union going and we started participating in union meetings. He was the one that started needling me. He says, well, you got to come out to the meetings. And I'm like, I don't want to go out to the meetings. I'm a 20-some-year-old kid. I'm like, I don't want to go to the meetings. And he said, no, you got to get involved and you got to get going to the meetings. And that was his expectation of me, just get involved. And I took that and I actually went to my first meeting, and then I started going to all the meetings, and then I went to my first convention, and now I wear a lot of union hats. So I've taken what he taught me and I've surpassed it, and I am now a leader in many different ways. And like with the Labor Council, I'm a unit vice president, and I also am the vice chair of the OMEC committee, which represents municipal workers from all across the province.
Oh, very good. Full disclosure, I grew up in Northern Ontario and in a railway town. And my dad was a railroader and he belonged to the union, but we were close to Sudbury. So I grew up in the era of the Inco, a lot of strikes, but it was a union town. So I grew up in the union and then became a nurse, and I was a union person. Of course, I grew up when the unions were just starting. So, you know, it's and a lot of people, it goes either ways. They either love unions or hate unions, as you know, but unions are important. And of course, we're going to talk about that today. So, of course, Chris, people might recognize you. You gave a really good effort representing our area in the federal NDP race for representative. So thank you very much for that. So today we want to talk about Labor Day and what it means to people, more than just a long weekend, the last long weekend of the summer, for people that are in the labor movement, and for workers and employees, employers even. It's more than just the long weekend. It's time to reflect on labor practices. What does Labor Day mean to you, Dave?
Labor Day, it really springs from the same sort of genesis that I talked about earlier on. As a young person, it was sort of that, oh my God, my summer's over. I have to go back to school. I mean, I never minded school, but you know what? I always had a preference of being somewhere else.
Of course.
But you know, that same sort of genesis, thinking, well, you know, people are talking about labor rights on that Monday. Maybe it's something I should look deeper and deeper into. And of course, once you start down the path of being an active trade unionist, I think Chris hit the nail right on the head. Before you know it, you wear many mantles and many caps, and you know, people are asking you to do this and do that. And of course, for me, Labor Day did morph into a day to be with workers. And it's easy for us in the trade union movement to say to be out with our sisters and brothers and comrades, because that's who we look to first. But it's a day for every single worker. It's not about just the union movement. We point to what the union movement has done from a socially progressive point of view. We didn't do it by ourselves. We had lots of allies, whether they be progressive politicians, whether they be simply allies on the street or students. So, Labor Day is a day for all of us to come in and say thanks for everybody for contributing.
What does it mean to you, Chris?
To me, it's a celebration of labor. All workers. It doesn't matter if you work in McDonald's or a convenience store, or if you're in a union job. You work for a living. You grind it out. You do what you need to do, and most of the time it's to help your families or to make sure there's food on the table. It's a celebration of all that. It's a celebration of our healthcare workers, our teachers. Everybody works. We all have to do our part. So to me, it's a celebration. And once again, because of my upcoming, like my dad poking me along, it became more and more important. Then when I started wearing my hats once again, for me, Labor Day now means more than it did than just a holiday than just a few years ago. It was just a holiday. Now it means something. It means that celebration, that togetherness, that bond with all the workers. And I'm excited about it.
Exactly. Now, we wanted to talk especially, not especially this Labor Day. Every Labor Day has issues that are timely. But this Labor Day, we want to talk about how the current atmosphere for workers is maybe perhaps different than it was in the last, say, 5 years ago. What's different now, do you think, Dave, than it has been in the last, or what issues do you think the workers are facing now that they weren't maybe in the last, say, 5 years?
I think that the contrast is easily seen. You see where we were in September of 2019. Workers were coming together to celebrate Labor Day, but we are also talking about, healthcare and public services. And the last 2 years bore so much of that out. I remember our past president from the Canadian Labour Congress, Hassan Yousaf. He held many webinars at the very, very early months of the pandemic. And he said that we have been in labor and it's sort of that socially progressive wing of society. So you can't underfund education, you can't underfund healthcare and all those public services like has been done, and expect when a crisis hits for the machine to run smoothly. And guess what? Not only the machine not run smoothly, but the cracks that had been formed through decades, a generation now, yes, really, of underfunding he wasn't going to say it did, but I think most of us can draw the line, may have cost lives.
Oh, yeah.
And I think workers are looking really hard and saying, you know what, enough of sort of that going to work and struggling to say, well, wait a minute, I'm going to have to spend $1,500 of my own money to stock my classroom if you're a teacher. Or I'm going to have to work in healthcare with not the appropriate procedures or personal protective equipment. Because at the end of the day, I still got to go home and I got to be there for my family and my friends. So I think workers have seen the opportunity now that it's a bit of a stronger market in favor of workers to say, we do want a little something. I really, really feel bad when people say, oh, it's a generational thing. Well, it's not really a generational thing. We may all speak maybe a different language, but at the end of the day, I think, Chris, you nailed it. Every worker wants to get up, go to work, be respected, have some dignity, come home and put food on the table and a roof over the head and have some quality of life. All that's happening now is there's a little more empowerment for those workers to say, we're going to take that mantle and run with it.
And when you speak to that, Dave, another point to that is that when you say they go to work and they want to go home to somewhere decent. And when they're not making a great wage, and they can't even afford the rent, or in this area, they say that, there's plenty of jobs. You hear that all the time, but they can't get to them because there's no transportation to get to them. So you hear it often, over and over again. There's so many jobs that people don't want to work. Well, that's not true. They want to work, but they can't get to them, and they can't afford the rent where the places are that the jobs are. So, enough of that language. It's not true. People need to recognize that. The housing is there, but it's too expensive, and there's no transportation to get to it. And when they do get to it, the wages aren't adequate. So, don't say that it's not true.
And everything you just said is bang on. At the end of the day, you see people struggling with affordable housing. All the large general labor organizations, the Canadian Labour Congress, the Federations of Labor, right down labor councils, the need for affordable housing, which connects to affordable public transit, are all connected at the hip.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and and I don't know when we will get that idea, that notion that public transportation is not a money-making venture. It's a social venture. You don't have transportation to make money. You just provide it. It's not meant to be a money-making venture. So if you lose money on it, so be it. But provide it at the right times so that workers, I've heard so many stories of people walking to work to make their first shift because there's no bus. That's not acceptable. These are workers that want to work, but they can't get there, so they walk. And that's dangerous. It's not acceptable. And that's what's happening here in Grey Bruce.
Well, I know Chris functions daily in the public sector, and he can probably speak volumes and volumes to exactly what you've just said. But for me, and I'm going to throw it to Chris, but for me, a public service should never be looked at as a money-making proposition, whether it be public transit or education or even telecommunications. We're in the wrong silo, I think. But I know, Chris, you talk the walk and walk the talk every day as a public employee.
Well, yes, Chris, then you're the expert. You tell us what your opinions on those things and what you're hearing from workers.
Well, first to touch on the jobs issue is the decent wage is maybe one of the hugest parts of it. People, if they can't afford to have 3 and 4 and 5 jobs. Sure, there's lots of jobs, but people need 3 and 4 jobs. I know people myself that have 3 and 4 jobs just to make full-time pay. You shouldn't have to have a schedule like that. Let's go with the healthcare industry and nurses right off the bat, the nursing shortage. Well, give them full-time jobs with benefits, enough hours to survive. That's the simplest solution. We hear our politicians come out and they say, oh, we're going to do this for healthcare. We're going to do that. No, just give them full-time jobs with wages and benefits that they can afford to live. As far as public sector, the demon word is privatization. Privatization, I'm going to make this very basic. It becomes for profit. So when your public services become for profit, that means they're going to do the basic necessities. They're going to do it the cheapest way with the cheapest equipment. And you're not going to get the service out of it. Public services, when you have public workers, they're doing the best they can for you because that's their job. My job is to keep my town beautiful, cutting grass, keeping the parks nice. That's what I do. Take pride in that. If it became privatized, you're just going to have somebody come in and does it. They're not going to care what it looks like because it's not their town. It's not their work. And they're not going to have real pride in it. Public services are meant to not be for profit. That is the whole point of a public service, is to give your best service to your community. If you hear the word privatization, let's be real. Privatization is to do it the cheapest, most ineffective way possible so that whoever the company is that gets that contract is going to make a profit off of it. And that's the way they're going to do it, is to make profit. It doesn't work. And if we go to privatized healthcare, that means it's going to be for profit. Do you think they're going to put the best in there? They're going to give you the best equipment and all that stuff? Not a chance. So we really need to pay attention to that buzzword. Or, a community review. Your council says you're going to have a community review, or they have other big fancy words for privatization. We need to pay attention to that. If you want the best services, you got to keep them public. That's just the long and the short of it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. When you mentioned nursing and having, part-time jobs, I graduated from nursing a long time ago. I should tell you, 77. I don't know when there have been a lot of full-time jobs other than in the big cities. There might be a few here and there. It's always been part-time and no benefits in lieu of benefits. Like, give people full-time jobs, like you say, with benefits. And it's in not just nursing, in everything. What is this hiring people with 30 hours? And so that in everything, at the local grocery stores and convenience stores, 30 hours, so that they don't get benefits, but they get 30 hours a week or whatever it is. It's just a way of not having to provide them with the safety net. If they get sick, they don't have to give them sick time. If they hurt themselves, they don't have to, they don't get prescriptions. They don't, all of that. It's just a common practice. And it just seems unfair, but it's so common. Have you seen that a lot?
I know I certainly have. One of the groups that we often come to disagreements with are our local chambers of commerce. Oh. And you know what? The first thing a chamber of commerce will get mad at me for is I tell them they're a union. No. Because all they've done is brought their store owners together as a collective group to lobby for a better, situation. So they're a union.
That's right.
And if you can get over that hurdle, we can usually discuss things, because it's all about sort of how do you ensure that the owner who has done the risk, of starting the business, and the worker. And again, it boils down to a simple sort of function of, if you look after your worker who you've spent the time to train and get involved, and they're going to stay on, and whether your product is service, or whether your services, or whether your product is something you can pick up in your hands, that employee that stays there and feels somewhat attached to that organization because they're looked after keeps you in business because they want to stay in business too. It's that difference of black and white. If you want an economy, which so many chambers do, of McJobs, where the guy can get $15 and be treated like garbage in this job and be treated a little less like garbage down the road for the same $15, well, why not walk down the road? But if you're making something more than that with some benefits and you choose some dignity, guess what? That person that owns the business, the person that works there does better.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Chris?
Well, I think Dave hit it on the head, and it also creates pride. The worker has pride. If you give your worker pride, and I am here, I'm a long time, and I'm proud to say I'm a long time employee. I just this month, August of this month, I am now starting my 30th year with Chesley/Aaron Elderslie.
Excellent.
I'm a long-term employee. I like my job. I like being here. I take pride in my work. If you create that aura of having pride and the worker's paid, he feels good when he goes home at the day's work, further pay, but they got benefits and they don't have to have another job that they have to go to at night. It just creates a different environment for your workers. And that's what we try to get home to employers is you don't want 50 part-time workers. You want 20 full-time workers, maybe a few part-time workers scattered in to, do some relief or whatever. But the part-time or the full-time workers create that environment for you. And if you pay them well and you give them pride in their work, you'll find long-time employees. You won't have turnover. It's that simple. And that's where I find maybe nurses are maybe lacking. What inspires our youth to go into nursing when they go to university, when they see what goes on in the nursing industry? If we want to create that, we need to not call them heroes during a pandemic, but say, we're cutting or we're capping your pay at 1% raise. It's ridiculous to think that that's going to work and create pride. Exactly.
And all the other professions too. I mean, we have to look at benefits. We have to look at, and teachers too. And teachers are returning to the classroom actually, they've been in the classroom. I was married to a teacher, so I know they've been in the classroom for about 2 weeks now, getting ready for the students. They don't just return September, whatever, and automatically everything's there and set up. They've been there for a while, contrary to popular belief. Now, will they be there, or is it every board is different? Will they be there virtually, or how does it work? What are they doing this year? Do you know?
Chris, you have to educate you in your home, so you're the expert.
Yeah. So it's a full planned on return. They're looking forward to it. My wife is looking forward to it. She'll be at the school this week, getting her classroom ready, all that stuff. The concerning part, and this once again speaks to the differences of a few years ago to today, is they're going into a contract year. So there's a little bit of uncertainty there. But now that's already being played out politically as, there's a strike coming and all these different things, which lowers morale. Mm-hmm. The reality is that it's just a public ploy. It's a move by the government to scare people that there's going to be a strike. The ones that have done the strike vote are actually the QP workers, the janitors, the EAs, the support staff. Those are the ones that have had their strike vote. And it's totally, and Dave will speak to this too, Ken, it's totally a common practice for a group when they're contract negotiating to have a strike vote early, just to say, okay, we've got that all done, so that in the heat of things, they don't have to go back and do it later. To say that it's anything other than that is just a public ploy to scare people. And the one thing I will say on behalf of those education workers is what they're asking for is not unreasonable. They are not paid like teachers. So trying to paint them in that same brush as, they're $100,000 a year teachers when they're like $30,000 to $40,000 a year workers, I find is very wrong. I think it's a scare tactic that shouldn't be used, because these people work hard. let's face it, a kid gets sick in a class, they're calling the janitor. Like, the janitors have the worst jobs. So let's pay them to have pride. Like, the janitors I know that work in schools have pride in their schools. They have pride in the shiny floors. Let's pay them that we appreciate that. And let's quit the politics around it. Let's not make it political. Negotiations are negotiations for any group. But to make it political and to demonize education workers and to lump them all together, it's sad. It breaks my heart. I'm sorry. That one's a little bit heavy for me, but the teachers, they take pride. They love being at the school. They love the kids. So let's not demonize them so much. I'll go over to Dave with the negotiations part of it, because I'm sure he'll be able to add to that.
I don't need much to add to it, but I think what's important to know, those same educators, those same, healthcare workers, we're hoping to see them on Monday. We have the Labor Day parade coming up in Port Elgin on Monday. It's gonna walk through Port Elgin. It's funny, I mean, this late date, we're not entirely sure exactly where the route is, but it won't be far different from what it has been in past years. But what we're going to be talking about, we've talked about. Come on out, celebrate your work, celebrate your contributions. Don't let the media mislead you about what's going on in negotiations. And let's see our public sector and private sector workers go down to Port Elgin and have a celebration, and then go right on down to the Unifor Family Education Center. And you know what? We'll be shoulder to shoulder for the first time in a couple of years, have a bite to eat, do some draws, and take that combination of long weekend celebration and add it to, we do have these issues that we think people need to see. And that Labor Day parade is that visible, tangible, maybe only once a year for some people, see those issues.
So we only have a few minutes left, but Dave, can you go over that again? What
Sure.
time do the events start?
So the event will start in the north end of Port Elgin. People will marshal on Monday the 5th.
Okay.
September. So they will marshal at the Shoreline Baptist Church and the Home Hardware at the north end of Port Elgin. Anytime after 9:30.
Okay.
And then the parade will commence at 11.
Okay.
And I said, we either will walk down the main street or one street over. It's just that there's been some difficulty in getting the final permits because everybody had a little COVID rust on them.
Right.
And we'll march down to Maple Square in Port Elgin, where we will then disperse down to the Unifor Family Education Center south of town. Unifor folks down there put on a great meal, free to the community. Anybody who shows up gets fed. We've got some raffles. And I always emphasize there'll be a few short speeches. There won't be anybody rambling on for forever. It's a few local people that will be giving some thanks and talking about a few issues. And hopefully we'll be able to celebrate, who we are, what we do, and point out really clearly where we need to do better.
Thank you very much, Dave. So thanks for joining us, Dave and Chris, and I hope you have a great day next Monday. Join us again on Politically Speaking. I'm your host, Sharen Skelly, sitting in for David Shearman, and join us again here on Rogers TV, Grey County. Bye for now.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
I did it.
I need it.
The hero gave it.